Hello! So today we're going to do a spoiler-filled chat for Death's End, which is the conclusion to the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, better known as the Three-Body Problem trilogy. I finished Death's End last night, and this morning when I sat down to write up notes for this discussion on it, I just threw up my hands, and I was just like, it's not happening. It can't happen. It can't be summarized. I'm probably wrong. I'm sure someone out there has done it, but my goodness, this book is so big. It's so expansive. I wouldn't even know how. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit on some of the biggest scenes that really hit me and stuck with me. And then from there, we'll talk about overall thoughts on the book, on the trilogy, and go from there, I guess. Or rather, end from there. So right from the jump with Death's End, I think that I know a common complaint about this trilogy is that the character work just isn't what Cixin Liu focuses on, and that's a big stumbling block for a lot of people's enjoyment, which I think is understandable. It absolutely isn't his biggest focus. But I think with each book, that increasingly gets better. I think in the Three-Body Problem, really no one felt like they got an extreme amount of characterization. But then I think in Dark Forest, we had the Wall Facers and each of their individual stories. And there were quite a few characters that while they're still not characters that I would put in my favorite characters of all time list, or characters that really stick with me for a long time, there's still characters that I feel I got a lot closer with and had really personal moments with. And then in Death's End, I think that this is easily the best one for the closeness of characters. In the beginning, Yun Tang Ming was a character that I felt very close to with his terminal illness diagnosis, with him feeling not ostracized, outside of society, feeling like he didn't fit in very basic ways in the way he communicated with other people and the way he interacted with the world. He just never felt a sense of belonging. Then getting to follow him as he purchases this star, he's very invested in how close it needs to be, and if it needs to have a moon, I think was his stipulation, I don't remember, and then he's kind of haggled down to what he can afford, and how that seems like a really sweet love story to the seller and his secretary, maybe? I think she worked for him. But anyway, how that truly was a really romantic gesture to them. And, he was going to make it anonymous because the point wasn't to catch her eye, to get her attention. He didn't really feel like he deserved to have that attention, or like it would even work if he put himself out there. He just accepted that, yeah, this isn't the future for me. Her affection isn't something that's within my grasp, but I still want to give something to her just as a really pure form of love. And then he goes into, after he buys the star and gives it to her anonymously, goes into the euthanasia program. And as he's going through the steps of choosing, are you sure this is what you want to do? Select 8 for yes, whatever for no, and he chooses it. But each time, because they ask the question 3 times just to make sure that you're sure, and each time as he's pushing the button, he's having a flash of reasons why he feels so isolated on this earth, and why he feels so outside of what's considered acceptable or normal, or what could make him actually feel a sense of belonging here on earth. And each time he went to push yes, and he got a new flash of why he's in the position that he's in today. It was so effective. It was such effective storytelling. It's so funny because while these books are they're so vast, they cover so much, and they're very distant in a lot of ways, in the sense that we cover such a huge span of time, with each book more and more time, as well as go wider and wider out into the universe with each book, and also with these big, lofty theories and concepts that we integrate into the story. And, it's an info dump each time, where the story kind of pauses for a second to make sure that we understand the concepts that we're introducing into the story, and that all kind of makes the narrative voice feel a little bit distant sometimes. And yet in moments like this, with these characters and their intimate moments, as well as really visceral, terrifying, horrifying scenes, he just draws us in so close, which means that he has the ability to do this. Cixin Liu has the ability to draw us in close and to make things feel very in your face and very personal and to get underneath your skin. And he just has so much that he's covering that he chooses the moments that he does it. Anyway, we have the staircase program that Cheng-Jin is a part of, and she is nominating Yoon Tae-min to be in it. And so their goal is to send someone to the Trisolarans to gain information. But this is a one-way ticket. This is potentially, it could be disastrous depending on what the Trisolarans want to do with this person. It's kind of a mission that who would want to do this? Like, who in the world would want to do this? So they created the euthanasia program specifically to find the person that would be willing to do this. And Cheng-Jin puts Yoon Tae-min forward for this program, interrupts this yes that he's doing in order to get him to do it. Anyway, turns out it has to be a brain. They can't send off anymore. They keep lowering the weight requirements, so it's only a brain. And here's hoping the Trisolarans can reactivate the brain. That gets lost. Shucks. Everything goes wrong in these books. And in this section, we also meet Wade, who is both the most infuriating and also, I mean, he gets stuff done. Like, he'll do what it takes to get stuff done. So he's necessary, yet punchable character. And he's the one that reveals that, oh yeah, by the way, he was the one that bought you that star, and then regrets and, oh man, the emotions. We also check in with the Bronze Age and Blue Space spaceships, and that trial with, I believe it was the Bronze Age that went on trial, and then they sent the message to Blue Space, like, don't come home. But they were on trial for crimes against humanity, for turning to cannibalism to survive. And that trial, again, it was another one of those scenes that just, I thought Si Jin-Lu did such a good job of drawing us in close and making us feel the full impact of what these people went through and how severe how visceral the reactions of the people who were trying them were, as well as how severe the consequences were. I'm curious to hear what you think, if you remember this scene. I don't know how long, if you're watching this, I don't know how long ago you read this book, but if you remember this scene, how you felt about it, because I kind of discussed it a little bit in my Discord while we were reading it, and it felt a little bit harsh to us because they were trying to survive. And I understand their reaction, but it also felt like, oh my goodness, this penalty is so hard for these people that have been through so much. But I think that the bit about the trial that really hit me the most was how much the man who was on trial, the captain of the Bronze Age ship, how regretful and sorrowful he was, where he was like, I'll tell you my story, I'll tell you the truth, I'll explain to you what happened, but you have to understand how much this has harmed. You have to understand how much mental toll this has put on these people that had to endure this. And it was the scene when he was describing, you know, when they would cook up the food and they would give it to them, and there was that recording of one of them saying, "Thank you, Carol." And he had to explain it was because one of the tags was, it survived the cooking process, and he saw the tag, and so he knew who was making it possible for him to survive. And that was just so embedded in my brain now. Like, I can't imagine, but I can imagine because he told us while on trial how much he has suffered, how much mentally this has taxed him to have to do what they had to do to survive. Anyway, so then we have the sword holder. So if you don't remember, I don't know how long ago you read this book. The sword holder is the person who holds the button, who has the ability to send a signal into space to let people know the location of the Trisolarans. So essentially to send a light in the dark forest, which would put a target on their back because the dark forest is hostile, and if a light shines, then you're gonna get attacked. So that would that's the forced peace agreement. The reason the Trisolarans haven't wiped us out to this point is because we can do this, and so they're trying to they're biding their time until we do get to see a little bit more of the culture of the Trisolarans. We get a little bit more. We get to see a little bit closer into them as well in this book, which I thought was a fascinating addition. But anyway, this is what has forced them into a momentary, well, long-term, by our years, peace agreement. And I loved the scene of the pass off of the sword holders because there was an emphasis on the fact that Luigi wasn't respected or honored in this position. It was noted during this pass off that no one thanked him for his service as the sword holder, that no one was grateful to him for his service. And then immediately after they did the pass off and he was no longer a sword holder, they tried to arrest him. He's not even out the building yet. And then her too, when she has the button in her hand, and again, no one thanks her, no one says anything to her. It's just the ceremony is over, it's over, we have a new sword holder. Everyone just kind of leaves as if this isn't a significant moment. And she notes how heavy the button feels in her hand. And then after she gets it, it's immediately noted in the book that her time as a sword holder, even though she's thinking about what life is gonna be and you know, she's seeing such a far future, but in fact, it only lasts 15 minutes. Why? Because the Trisolarans correctly guessed that she wouldn't be able to push the button. They were right. So instantaneously after the switch off, they attack. Like, just imagine you see the whole world in front of you. You see so much of a future as this new position that you're in, and then within minutes, a droplet just appears in front of you. Like, can you imagine the kind of terror that would strike to have this false sense of security, this false sense of knowing what your future holds, and then a droplet is just there? Can you imagine? I can't. But that's a pattern that happens over and over and over again with the series, is that the humans develop a comfort, they develop a sense of ease, they develop a sense of feeling safety, and that is exploited, and that is taken advantage of, or that is their very undoing, because they're constantly reminded that they are not the biggest, that we are not the biggest players in this universe. The Earth sank into a dream of peace and prosperity. The Trisolarans have been waiting patiently and are now taking their chance. So then we have, in the post-deterrence era, we have the 4 dimensions collapsing into 3 dimensions, and doom, doom is imminent. So we have the 2 surviving ships that decide to broadcast the location of the Trisolarans. They decide to push the button. And that scene where they're all gathered around the button and one by one they push it together was such an incredible scene. I loved that Si Jin-Liu actually drew a parallel of the first signal that was sent out at the end of book 1, and now at the end of the series, the signal being sent out once again. And then that leads us right into the broadcast era, which is the next section. And first of all, I didn't expect it all to happen so fast. But again, the parallel, it feels so similar to the first signal that was sent out and how immediate the response was, how quickly the Trisolarans descended on us. And of course, it took several years because of space and time, but how quickly they moved, how instantly they responded. And it was the same case here. It really feels like so many things in this series tied together with book 3, be it the parallels to things that happened previous. We see them on this, what feels like a large scale of this first contact, this alien invasion, this idea that we're not the only ones in the universe, and how terrifying that concept can be. And then in this book, broadening it even more, but doing all these parallels to the first time we watched it happen, but making it bigger and making it even more dark, and dark in the sense of a dark forest, where it's like, what's out there? What could this be if we go to this point? And when we do go to that point, when it happens, we see how similar it looks once again. Oh my goodness, just brilliant. I just loved it. I loved it so much. Also in the broadcast era, Tiang Ming is able to contact Chang Jin, and he's able to tell her these 3 fairy tales. And at first I mean, it was very well written. They were interesting fairy tales, but there was a piece of me that was like, oh my goodness, I don't necessarily want to pause to have this really long telling of 3 tales, which is funny because I'm currently reading The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, who is the translator of the 3-Body Problem and Death's End. And he does this too in The Dandelion Dynasty, where he'll have this massive in scope, epic fantasy tale, sci-fantasy tale, and then he'll just pause, and there's a big emphasis on the value of storytelling and on the value of stories, and he'll just take a really long time to tell a story. And it really reminded me of Ken Liu's own writing. But anyway, at first I was like, okay, this is interesting, but also why are we spending so much time on this? But the way they were utilized and how important they ended up being, how they tied into everything, and how these had these hidden messages that we wouldn't even be able to decode and understand until we were at the point that it was kind of coming to fruition. Really stumbled over that word. Anyway, amazing. Amazing in retrospect. In the moment, I was a little bit impatient. In retrospect, amazing. Then we move into Bunker Era. This is when on Earth, the Earthians, the humans, move to space cities. The progress on light speed, what is it? Research on light speed is still illegal. Wade is still working on it regardless. We have this stuff with antimatter, and he cuts off her hair, and he does the experiment and shows it to her. Oh my goodness. And Wade is imprisoned and executed, but then years and years and years down the line, we find out that really his research is what could have saved all of our lives. And that's another thing that comes up over and over again in these books, is humanity feeling so lost in the situation that they've been forced into, feeling so overwhelmed and outclassed, outmatched around every corner, and just doing everything in their power to figure out what the right maneuver is, be it the wall facer program, the staircase program, the sword holder situation, like everything they're doing, they're just trying desperately to figure out, what should we do? What can we do? And there are mistakes made around every corner in these books. And I just really appreciate how close to realism this very vast and expansive and theoretical story is, in the way humans, in the place that humanity has in the story. Like, we're not the main point. We may be the main perspective being followed, but we're not the heroes or the most important or most advanced people in the story. In fact, the exact opposite. The universe and other civilizations are bigger and more advanced than us, and the amount of chaos that comes with each moving step, and the amount of fear and dread and unsureness of what we can do is so, it feels so real, but then also constantly making moves and finding, okay, that didn't work, or okay, that was a disaster, or oh no, we needed his research actually. So I love that there's so many failures throughout this story, because I feel like in such a desperate situation as this, there should be. That's exactly how this story should go, to make it feel like that actual impossible situation that this would be. Anyway, skipping over some things, they do end up getting a paper-like attack. I love the way that was described, collapsing things now into 2 dimensions. I mentioned in my last review that these books feel claustrophobic, and this is probably the section where that claustrophobia felt the strongest, when we realized, okay, our solar system is going to collapse in a matter of days. We have to figure out how to get out. It was so interesting to see what humanity tried to do in this situation, like preserving their artifacts, leaving something of themselves for someone down the line to potentially find. But through this, we find out that Lu Ji actually has a spaceship that can travel at light speed. How convenient. So Cheng Jin and AIAA, I've never had to say that out loud, AIAA, am I saying that right? Who I haven't even mentioned up to this point in this review, summary, whatever it is I'm doing, got away. Lu Ji chose to stay on Pluto and was destroyed along with the rest of the solar system. And then we go into the galaxy era. And this, oh my goodness. I'll keep this section kind of condensed, because while this section I think was important, it also was a little bit of a slowdown after, you know, the Dark Forest attack, after everything was destroyed and we only have a couple of survivors in the entire universe that we know of. But we have our pocket dimensions. We have these 2 characters who did not end up with the people that they would have chosen, but did find companionship with each other, which I thought was actually a great parallel. Let me pull up my notes from the last book. I thought it was a great parallel to the last book. I quoted something in that one. I only wish to discuss with you one possibility. Perhaps seeds of love are present in other places in the universe. We ought to encourage them to sprout and grow. So in this book, again, we got to see a closer look into the Trisolarans' civilization and how they function and them as individuals. But we also, at the end of this book, our universe collapsed, most everyone died, and it has a pretty bleak ending. But we still kind of have that spark of hope with these survivors who, while it is very bittersweet because they didn't get to end with the ones that they would have chosen, they did find that companionship with each other. And while it would have been safer and easier for them to stay within their own little pocket universe, they chose to go out into the greater universe and potentially find hope there. And I don't know, I love this ending. My dad hated it. My dad was so into this trilogy and was reading it all along right next to me and loving every beat. But then the end, I'll read you his text. Didn't care for the end. The whole universe ends and then the universe just begins again. Kind of seems like a lame ending. And I totally disagree. I loved the ending. I thought that I think that the whole universe ending, while I wouldn't have predicted that to be the ending of the series, I think that it's the perfect end because of the tone throughout the entirety of this story. If it ended with the humans rising up and figuring it out and actually being the strongest or the smartest or the baddest or the ist, some sort of ist, if it turned out that humanity rose above it all, I don't feel like that would fit what this story was doing throughout all of these many pages. Throughout this whole trilogy, each time humanity felt like it had an answer, or it got stronger, or it had a leg up, or had a sense of security, each time humanity was reminded, we're not the center of the universe. We're not the greatest civilization. We're not the most advanced, the strongest. We're not it. Humanity isn't it, which is why the Force is dark, and we want to keep it that way. And to end with, actually we are it. Actually, we're amazing. Like, that just wouldn't fit with this story. So I think it fit thematically. Truthfully, I kind of love the messaging there of we're not the center of the universe. I think humans in general, are very inclined to be very, very selfish, very inward facing, very, like, we make ourselves the center of the universe in our own minds. Each of us can do. And my personal belief is the best way of living is to not live like that, to constantly remind yourself that you're not the center of the universe. Your life, your perspective, your person is not the most important thing, and instead to treat other people with the kind of value that they matter and that they have as much importance on this earth as you do. I think that is the best way for us to live for ourselves, to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And if more people acted that way, then it would probably be a better world. So I love the ending being like, hey, just remember, you're not it. Like, you're not the center of the universe. You're not the most important thing on this planet. But then also having that thread of hope throughout all three books of hope in individuals, hope in relationship. I don't know, I feel like, just between my dad and I, it's a divisive ending. I feel like it's probably a divisive ending amongst readers, so I haven't dug deep into what readers think just yet. I could imagine that probably there are some mixed opinions, but I really loved this ending. Anyway, some more overall thoughts. The just overall trilogy, Death's End, this series was so much more than I expected it to be. It was, from what I thought I was getting into with the three-body problem, and then what it ended up being. It broke the boundaries of what I ever could have expected. This has got to be the most ambitious trilogy I've ever read, both in new concepts and in execution and in where it went and how vast it went. This is such a unique story, and I love it for that. I love it for how fresh it feels despite having read so many books. I've read so many books, and it seems like in every beat this book didn't do what I expected it to do, and I love it for that alone. But I also love it for how things actually tied together so nicely at the end. Like, things really came together. There were so many parallels. There was so much intentionality. This book felt bigger than my brain could ever, this trilogy felt bigger than my brain could ever wrap around, and yet I still feel like it was so cohesive and intentional, and I'm amazed at the scope in this book, but this trilogy, but also in the success and execution, unbelievable. I feel like Shang-Chi is also a character that could be a little bit divisive because she makes mistakes and she makes choices for humanity that are, you know, they're not positive. It doesn't work out. She makes mistakes. I can see her being a character that people kind of hate for that reason, but I kind of love her because she really shows the softer side of humanity, the kind and gentle side of humanity, the side that thrives when there's no war, and she just doesn't want war. And I think that that's an admirable thing, and I also think that I can sympathize with the fact that we're in such an unknowable situation in these books that how can you know what's to be done? Whereas Wade is the kind of character that will do what needs done to get things done. He's gonna do what needs done to survive. He is the survivor. And I think it's an interesting look at which one is correct. If you are this survivor, this do what it takes to make sure that humanity ends up on top, then you kind of lose your humanity and become a Wade. And who wants to become a Wade? But on the other hand, Shang-Chi, that strive for peace can also mean that, you know, you end up being taken advantage of or being they see your weak spots and exploit them. The Trisolarans are a civilization of their own. They have their own families and their own love and their own humanity of sorts. And what makes them less important than us, other than that they're not us? What makes their survival less important than ours, other than they're not us? And I don't know, this book kind of forces you to think about all those things. And I come out of this trilogy not feeling like, I agree with Xi Jinlu on all things always. I mean, there's a lot of things that he wrote into his books that I do not share his perspective on. I don't believe every theory he presented. I don't agree with every social structure that he put in place or every human response that he created in his stories, but I didn't expect to. This is very much a trilogy of thought and a trilogy that challenges us to think. And if it leads us in a different direction, then killer. Or at least that's the way I read it. But it was a fascinating thought experiment and an incredible read. Again, it's info dumpy in many, many places. It's convenient at times, and there's many choices that he made that I personally wouldn't have made, but I don't, in the writing sense. But it was still probably the most lofty story that I've read, and the ability to create this dread and emotion on page while also balancing these incredibly lofty concepts was just incredible. It was mind-blowing. It was incredible. I wouldn't call this the perfect trilogy, but it's definitely one of my favorite things that I've read this year. Oh, and I'm so excited for the adaptation. I forgot we were getting one of those. That's gonna be crazy. Oh my goodness, how are they gonna do that? I can't wait to see how they try. I definitely think that there are parts of the story that can be distilled and condensed and still get the concepts across. So let's see them try. Anyway, I've been recording for a long time, so I'll stop. I would love to hear your thoughts on Three Body Problem, a Nope on Death's End, or Three Body Problem, Dark Forest, all of them. So let me know what you thought about the book. I would love to continue the discussion. I know I skipped over so much that happened. There was so much that happened. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday on this channel, Mondays and Fridays on the manga channel, always linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.